Thank you so much. Perfect. Okay. We'll dive straight in. So big thanks to each of you, and PJ, thanks so much for sharing your insights as a leading manufacturing company in our community, some of those lessons learned along the way. I'd like to invite Chelsea and Nicole to both introduce yourselves, and if you could just give us a high-level overview. Chelsea, what is Export Navigator? And then we'll move to Nicole talking about the Trade Commissioner Service. So over to each of you.
Yeah, so I'm Chelsea, the head of advisory services for Export Navigator. For those that aren't familiar, we are a program that supports BC businesses in growing their markets outside of the province, so interprovincially and internationally. And we do that through our advisory services. So when I say we, I have a team of 13 export advisors. They're based in regions across the province, and so have that regional expertise, but also that technical expertise when it comes to exporting. They are all or have been entrepreneurs themselves, so have that hands-on experience. And so a client's journey can vary. It looks different depending on who the client is, what sector they're from. But sometimes, it's very early on. We're helping clients become export ready. So in that planning phase, sometimes they're already exporting and trying to navigate the ground in market, having those connections there, or maybe they're already been exporting for a while and are trying to overcome some, technical hurdles, especially now, with everything happening in the current trade environment. We've been getting some clients come to us with things related to CUSMA compliance. So, again, we're pretty broad-based in terms of the companies that we serve, the regions that we serve, and the size of the companies that we serve. And the best part of all, I always forget to lead with this, is that we are a free program because we are funded by both the province as well as Pacifican. We are able to offer our advisory services for free. And one also key part of our program as well is we do have a technical specialist pilot that we launched in the fall. So beyond our export advisors, our clients will also have access to a roster of experts. So these are people like accountants, customs brokers, immigration lawyers that can really help bridge that gap from helping a client from not exporting to exporting. So we subsidize those costs up to 5 hours with one of these specialists.
Thanks, Chelsea.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Van Hove. So I'm an acting deputy director for the Trade Commissioner Service. So we basically also help Canadian exporters for free. So we do that for all of Canada. And my office works specifically with companies in BC and the Yukon. So that's our elevator pitch. And then how we specifically do that is we have trade commissioners based across Canada and the world. So everywhere you think of a Canadian embassy or a consulate or a trade office. So that's 160 cities where we have people on the ground. And then what we do is we give advice on your export plans and your market. So maybe you're talking to someone in our office, maybe there are some things we can flag for you that you could consider. We also do referrals to partners like Export Navigator and then the World Trade Centre's Trade Accelerator program so people can get up and running with an export plan. And then we also introduce people to our trade commissioners who are working in the country that you're targeting to get to their advice on, is your product a fit for this market? What are some of the common pitfalls for doing business? Do you just want a briefing on how business isn't done, things that might be different for you? PJ mentioned looking for people and experts on the ground who can help you when you're expanding. So we do qualified contacts as well. Sometimes that looks like our service provider list that most of our offices have. So they have people on there like qualified lawyers and cross-border accountants and HR specialists, if you're looking to open a sales office somewhere. The best part of our job sometimes is that our trade commissioners are also going out to businesses and other entities pitching Canada, and sometimes they come with a lead and say, I'm working with someone who's looking to buy this or partner on that, and then we go and see who do we know in Canada that might be able to fill that need. We do problem solving. We all hope that you're not having problems, but if you are, short of giving actual legal advice, we'll give you our list of lawyers. Sometimes a call from the Canadian embassy or consulate can help unstick something in certain markets. Probably not in the US, but there are other countries where that kind of thing matters. We also have funding programs and things like our Can Export program that helps de-risk going into new markets that you can apply for. So it'll help cover like up to 50% of certain eligible costs, like if you're flying to market, to go to things like trade shows, if you need to translate your marketing material, if you're hiring someone to do a bit of business development for you, things like that. We do things like trade missions, Canadian technology accelerators in foreign markets. So I think I'll stop there for now, but happy to chat about any of that after.
Thank you both. Okay, so let's dive in. This has been we've heard from PJ as a successful company navigating the moment that we're in right now. I'd like to hear from each of you. What else are you seeing out there in terms of seeing those successful companies being able to navigate? Are there any additional pieces of advice or lessons learned as businesses have navigated this complex environment?
Okay, everyone's looking at me. I'll go.
I was like, whoever wants to jump in
Sure.
first. Over to you, Nicole.
Yeah, so one thing that we're hearing from our embassy in Washington is it costs you less to retain a customer than to get a new customer. So while we do encourage everybody to diversify, also think about retaining your customers, as PJ was saying. And then at the same time, maybe the US is still the right first market for your company if you're just starting your exports, but maybe you need to really accelerate where you plan to go next, and also have like your secondary export plan in place or up and running a lot faster. Do you want to add?
Yeah, I think I think I touched on there is the not panicking thing, and I think it's first reaction is always, oh my God, what is this going to mean for our company? What is this going to mean for our customers? And not just reacting how you might want to react right away. And so I've seen, as I said, a lot of our competitors going the one way. Where maybe it's in the short term you're avoiding a little bit of pain, but in the long term, as I said, the cost of gaining a customer back, and like we've heard of a couple of situations where like we'll never buy from them again because of a situation. So I think just staying the course as much as you can, as long as it's obviously not an existential threat to the company, it's really important to just stay steady and not be wildly swinging with you don't want to be changing your price every month because the tariffs are changing.
Yeah, I mean, I think for our clients that are already exporting, the ones that are most successful are those that are definitely not reactive and are more proactive. So, like PJ mentioned, this isn't forever, the current situation, it is temporary. So having that long-term strategy is really important. And planning with our export advisors, doing scenario planning to know, what your thresholds are, how far you can go in terms of the impact of tariffs on your business, is really important, I see. And if you aren't already exporting, I see success in clients that are sort of starting small and being intentional, again, echoing PJ's some points on his slides, but just taking those sort of bite-sized chunks we break down exporting it into several different stages to make it a little bit less overwhelming. So doing that, I think, really helps clients understand how to grow intentionally and smart.
Chelsea, you've taken us beautifully into the piece around what about those businesses that are just wanting to dip their toe into new markets? Because there's a real mix of folks in this room. We've got aerospace, agri-food. Some of you are exporting already. Some of you are just starting to explore that possibility. So, can you share a little bit of that advice? You've touched on it a bit from the Export Navigator perspective, but how do you grow into this? Is there a mindset opportunity for people to explore this? What advice do you have for those that are in those early days?
Yeah, I mean, mindset is definitely really important. It's one of the key things we look for when working with a client. And if anyone has ever seen an Export Navigator presentation, like growth mindset is one of the key things on our slides, right? So having that mindset, to want to learn, to have the capacity to learn, it's not something you do off the side of your desk. So dedicating that time to it. I think, again, breaking it down into these bite-sized pieces also feels like you're reducing the risk a little bit. We start with the awareness phase in Export Navigator. So really wrapping your mind around how exporting can benefit your company will also kind of tie in the why as to why you want to do it. And then stage 2 is really like the planning phase. So looking at where your business is at, maybe your original business plan, because your export plan is often like an evolved version of your business plan for a certain market, right? So making sure you have, your finances in place, your operations, your people, all of these things will help, I think, break it down again and make it more manageable. And also, once you do have that export plan developed, it's really helpful for the rest of the team to stay on the same page as to, what your goals and objectives are for exporting to a specific market.
And we've also heard a lot about creativity, and Chelsea has mentioned as well, making sure that you've got people to dedicate to exports and not doing it off the side of your desk. I would say, having worked for the Trade Commissioner Service for 17 years now, you sort of see this chicken and egg where people don't want to invest the money to hire someone until they're making those extra sales from exports. So having a very intentional human resources plan can really help. So if you want to be really creative at the beginning, because maybe you can't hire someone full-time to work on exports, or maybe you're diversifying outside of North America and you can't hire a full-time manager for that yet, but what can you do in the interim? So there's this business benefits finder you can log, you just Google it, happy to show anyone. It'll show you a lot of programs that can subsidize hiring. So maybe you can hire someone to do something that your core team is doing and get that subsidized, free up that person's time, half time, to work on exports. Or maybe you can hire a recent graduate with a bit of a subsidy to focus on exports, or hire someone at 25% and ramp them up to 50%, or share a resource that you co-hire with another company and you're both hiring them on contract for like 50% of their time, so that someone can be at least partly dedicated to exports, especially as you're looking to expand outside of the US. I've seen so many people at the edge of burnout, I would say, because they're trying to travel everywhere and be available at all time zones 24/7. So you want to have that plan, like, this is what we're going to do at first, then we're planning to get more sales from exports, then we can eventually hire someone full-time on our staff, and eventually your goal is maybe to have a sales office in that market so they can be serving locally and responding in local time. So really just having that plan, and then how are you going to ramp up your production to match, to make sure that you don't miss out on bigger orders?
Yeah, and I think the lesson we learned initially when we were in the U.S. market, we really didn't have any salespeople in the U.S. We'd go to trade shows, we'd have people traveling down there, and then the pandemic hit. And we had lots of success, and the pandemic hit, and all of a sudden we actually could not get across the border, and we really suffered for it. We were still creating a lot of leads, we were still creating a lot of awareness, but people started eating our lunch down there because they were close to the market, and they, had those conversations with the customer near the point of ordering where we just weren't aware even of what was happening. And so that really solidified for us in terms of growing into an actual presence in the U.S. And so I think we actually have 3 people starting the next couple of weeks in some key markets, but we're up to, I think, 13 or 14 salespeople in the U.S. And we had some, actually a competitor through our building the other day, and they said, how have you guys grown? The market in general is not growing. And it's like, well, it's actually the impact of our presence now in that market makes such a difference in terms of having the conversations to really understand what's going on with your customers. And when it comes down to the buying decision, and it's different, obviously for us, it's more project-based, comes down to that buying decision. Are you close enough to them to know that, hey, there's a problem, other than you call them 2 weeks later and said, oh, I already ordered a competitor. And so that's been a real revelation for us, I think.
And I was just going to add to Nicole's piece about the production. I think, we've chatted, it's a little bit of like the chicken and the egg. Do you hire somebody, or do you create the sales and market? And I think, I'll just give you an example of a client that we were working with. He's a leather guy. They produce leather wallets, and it used to take 2 weeks for him to make one leather wallet. After working with one of our advisors, looking at the whole team, our advisor suggested, well, you should really hire a production manager if you really want to grow your markets quickly and intentionally. And so it took down that production time to 3 days. So, and I think as well, I used to come from the private sector. I used to have my own business. It's hard, I think, making that jump to hire a person, especially oftentimes when you might have to pay that person more than your own salary that you're making. But it is an investment in growing your business and growing your markets.
Excellent. I want to ask a question specifically about why Canada right now. And PJ, you talked a little bit about why you as a company have chosen to stay in Canada, in Abbotsford, and some of those strategic advantages. But I'd also just like to hear each of you touch on it, because as we see some of that pressure to have businesses move across the border, change their operations, why should they stay here?
Yeah, I can kick that off maybe. I think there's sort of three things there. I mean, this comes back to the moment when you see those tariffs and you start thinking about possibilities. I've costed out what it would look like to move some production into the U.S. At a high level, and there's a few things that I think that are real, actual, barriers to really wanting to do that. One is obviously this is hopefully a very temporary situation that we're in, so you don't want to make that kind of a move of moving production, hiring people, doing all that stuff. But the other piece is for us, we're so vertically integrated, and to go and put a manufacturing step somewhere else, all of a sudden you lose that value with your culture. It's really hard to rebuild, and then you're coordinating between them. The friction and sort of inertia that creates, I think, around your business processes really hurts. And then the last thing, we've looked a couple times at some acquisitions in the U.S., and I'm always struck by, you think about, well, it's maybe a lower cost of labor. They've got a $7.50 minimum wage. And in a lot of cases, maybe the wage is a little less than what you pay in Canada. But, for us, and I think as a Canadian, healthcare is such an important thing. And we provide healthcare for all our salespeople in the U.S., and it is astonishingly expensive. And it's incredibly confusing. I actually lived in the U.S. for 2 years, and I was under that healthcare plan, and I had no idea how it worked. And so our group, our HR group, and my controller and I sit down and review these plans, and it's like, what do these things even mean? And we're paying so much money, and I think we're providing what is adequate, but there's all those other little costs to having a business down there, and there's just a different mindset. Like, you don't think about healthcare costs, but it's such a huge line item down there. That can really take that sort of operational cost gain that you might think you have away. Or you end up with maybe a little bit more of a transient employee base. We also do get, we've got lots of times where states have come to us or regions have come to us and said, hey, we'll give you, you don't even understand, we'll give you free energy, and we'll give you land, we'll give you a building. And generally those places, it may look good, but you're like, well, why are they doing that? It's because it's usually an economically depressed area. They're not going to have the same quality of people that I think we have here generally. And so we've just said, we're vertically integrated. It doesn't make sense to go look elsewhere. This is hopefully temporary. Maybe at some point down the road we'd look, but it just didn't make sense to us.
And to build on some of your points earlier on your slides about Canada's free trade agreements, our free trade agreements actually cover 2/3 of the world's GDP. So if you are looking to sell in places other than the States, or the States and elsewhere, it might make more sense to do that from Canada. So I think we're the only G7 country to have agreements that cover all of the G7 in Europe. So that would be another addition.
Yeah, so I think the access is a great part of being Canadian, but also it's that branding, right? You're a product of Canada, made in Canada. And I think right now we have a really unique opportunity. We've seen an uptick in these, buy local, or the Canadian brand as a whole, being reliable, being high quality, being in a great regulatory environment. These are all things that trickle down across all sectors, right? Whether it be agri-food, tech. It's very well known that Canada has a great brand across different sectors around the world. I think also as well, being in Canada, you get access to a lot of great programs, and I'm not just tooting my own horn, but there's a lot of really good grants that are available for companies, funding opportunities that really aren't available in the U.S. or other markets as much.
I love that. Exciting opportunity to leverage brand Canada. This is exciting. I want to invite some questions from the audience as well. So if there's a burning question that any of you have, please raise your hand, and one of our team members will drop off a mic for you. But perhaps while people are thinking about it, we'll move on to just a question about. We're going to talk about CUSMA compliance in the next round here, but. I'd love to hear some comments about becoming eligible, what you're seeing as trends that are happening, and some of the challenges that businesses might be facing right now around CUSMA compliance.
So I recently saw a stat that about 9 out of 10, almost 9 out of 10 companies are eligible for CUSMA. Many were not claiming it prior to the tariffs. About 36% were claiming CUSMA benefits, and it's just because I think the cost value benefit of it, understanding how to be compliant, the paperwork involved. So I would say you can figure out first if you're eligible easily by figuring out your HS codes, your country of origin, your input supply chains, and so forth. And you don't have to navigate that alone. There's lots of programs, education that are available, this being one of them. The Trade Commissioner Service also has a really great page and phone line dedicated to CUSMA compliance and eligibility. And then also we at Export Navigator are launching a new program in July that will also support businesses that are trying to become CUSMA compliant and figuring out, again, like the HS codes and country of origin as well.
And PJ, you had mentioned working with a customs broker. That's something we recommend often. And I know at Chelsea, you've got the Technical Specialists program, which includes customs brokers, no?
Yes, yeah, we do. So we subsidize up to 5 hours with that technical specialist pilot as well. And yeah, the CUSMA compliance requests have been definitely peaking in the last few months.
Excellent. Okay, we had a question right from the gentleman in the back. Over to you.
Hi, this is a question for PJ. So have you incorporated in US or are you still a Canadian entity working in US?
Yeah, so we incorporated a company probably 4 years ago at this point, but really that was actually more about employing people in the US. You don't want to employ someone out of a Canadian company who's based in the US for all sorts of reasons. But yeah, we're Delaware incorporated, and there is a cost to doing that, both from you got to file your taxes, you got to get it registered, you have to have an agent down there. Like, there's all sorts of costs to that. But for us, it's been really invaluable, both in terms of hiring and building that team, but also the transfer price opportunities that are there. And even just having a U.S. company actually helps sometimes. Like, it's called Longboard USA, and it sometimes helps just having that visibility, and like all our invoices say Longboard USA, and so yeah, I think that helps as well.
Any other questions from the audience? Oh, we're a quiet crew. Everyone's looking for coffee. I like this. Well, maybe I'll invite one more question from I'll do one more question for the panel, which is that we have some folks in the room who I know are specifically interested in accessing the European market, and then a few that are interested in accessing markets in the Indo-Pacific. So 2 different places. But just if you could maybe high level provide some insight for them. Where should they start? Who should they call? Their early days? What's the next step?
If I can share a few things about the Indo-Pacific market. So we have a Canadian Indo-Pacific trade representative, and his job is basically to look for and facilitate opportunities there. And some of the insights that he's been sharing are, he thinks some of the markets they have opportunities that maybe Canada hasn't taken as seriously as we could. So he's named specifically Cambodia, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and he is also talking about local conglomerates in market who can be reliable business partners and market entry points. And then what he said he's seen from the Canadian side is sometimes the Canadian side is not as quick to follow up on potential deals, and then we are losing out to competitors from places like China or Japan. So that I would say, again, you just want to work towards expanding who is working on exports on your team and eventually getting that local salesperson so you can follow up really quickly and not be losing out on some of your potential deals.
Follow up, hey, that's always key. Chelsea, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was just going to say, beyond partners, I would say look at your local network. I think one of BC's strengths when it comes to exporting is our local diaspora, right? We have so many people, whether in our own networks that we're not aware of, that they will have local connections, that they do have the language. And so really honing into that and leveraging that in these markets, because that in-market connection is really key for both the Indo-Pacific as well as Europe.
Brilliant. Okay, I don't see any more hands jumping up in the room, so I'll close us off with this, just an invitation for any last pieces of advice that you want to share with businesses in the room, anything you'd like to leave them with as they navigate their export journeys.
Well, our office is here and happy to help you sit down and look at free resources that might help you identify where you could be exporting to, and then there's offices like Chelsea's and World Trade Centre and Trade Accelerator program who can really dig down into turning that into a concrete export plan, and then you sort of come back to us, and then we help you in market. So just take advantage of those resources. We also have offices across the states, I should mention, if you do need things like those service provider lists.
I think for me, just if I look at our sales mix, Canada's a great market. We sell lots into Canada, but we're 80% now into the U.S. And so the world is big, and I hear a lot. The world needs more Canada, and so I think as much as we can export what we do here, I think that's great for us, and it's great for the world.
And my thing is I guess, right now, exporting may seem scary, whether you're exporting or you're trying to export, but you are not in it alone. When I first came in the room, I was talking to PJ about community and network. And so, again, I think really making those connections, whether it be with others in your industry or partners, will really help to make the journey a little bit easier.
Brilliant. Well, I really want to thank the three of you for all of your insights today. Can we get a round of applause for them?
And thank you for the organization.
Yeah. And if you want to hear more specifically from PJ and Longboard, I'll shout out our manufacturing industry tour, which is happening this October. We'll be touring a number of leading manufacturing companies across the city of Abbotsford. It's being produced in partnership with the city, and we're pretty proud of the businesses in our community and what they're doing, the scale of business that they're running, and the products that they're creating. So please come and join us in October. With that, we're going to take a short break. So grab some coffee, network, and we'll be reconvening in about 15 minutes for round 2. Thanks, everyone.